Could Trump actually try a Putin-style move on America's closest neighbor and ally, Canada? Sounds absurd, I know. But then again, this is Trump. America now has tanks and soldiers in the streets of Washington, and anonymous, masked ICE squads kidnapping people off the streets of LA. They've already said that they would like to suspend habeas corpus, which guarantees basic fundamental rights. We've seen a U.S. senator being knocked to the ground, beaten, handcuffed, and arrested. Why? Because he asked questions at a press conference. So the question of what Trump wouldn't do is a moot point. We have to start accepting that Donald Trump is a madman, with no guardrails or limitations, and no concerns whatsoever about the consequences of his actions and behavior. He truly thinks that he has the God-given right and the support of America to do whatever he deems necessary to further his agenda. When you mix Trump's ego, his power, and his desire to be a strongman, anything is possible. Donald Trump has never been shy about his admiration of Vladimir Putin. He even called him savvy and a genius when Russian tanks rolled into the Ukraine, starting an unprovoked war in February 2022.
I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right.
Trump described that as hardline negotiation tactics. And he said about Putin, here's a guy who's very savvy. I need to acknowledge that this is the scariest and perhaps the most important video that I've ever made. So please take your time, watch it from start to finish, and carefully consider what I have to say. Because I believe that Canada's sovereignty and even our very existence is being threatened by Donald Trump. And the reality of that threat is growing every day. Even a few days ago, I would have said that was preposterous and an extreme overreaction. But not anymore, because the pieces are all starting to fit together. I'm going to open up with a clip from political commentator Kyle Kulinski. You'll find a link to his channel and his full video in the comments.
Guys, got some massive breaking news here for you. So this is in the Miami Herald. As U.S. warships approach Caribbean waters, Maduro mobilizes 4.5 million militias. Okay, so we're going to get into this, but you have 3 different U.S. warships being sent to Venezuela. You also have 4,000 Marines being activated to be sent to Venezuela. So this is not looking good, y'all. This is not looking good. Now, Trump also signed a directive the other week to greenlight attacks on Mexican drug cartels in Mexico in violation of Mexico's sovereignty. So you have the Mexican government going, we don't want you fucking bombing in here. What are you talking about? And you have Trump going, we're going to bomb there. That's what we're going to do. So he threatens Greenland. He threatens Mexico. He threatens Panama. He's already bombed Somalia. He's already bombed Yemen. He's already illegally bombed Iran. He tried a coup in Venezuela in his last term and didn't succeed.
It's the real thing. Trump, who keeps saying that he wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize, is taking America into war to fight and combat the evils of illicit drugs and drug cartels to protect the security of America. Now, think about Trump sending forces into Venezuela and authorizing military actions on foreign soils in light of the false claims and accusations that he has already been making about Canada and the fentanyl drug crisis. Here's what was posted to the White House webpage on July 31st. It starts off, fact sheet. President Donald J. Trump amends duties to address the flow of illicit drugs across our northern border. The White House, July 31st, 2025. Addressing a national emergency, Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order increasing the tariffs on Canada from 25 to 35%, with the higher tariffs set to go into effect on August 1st, 2025. And their justification for this? Shortly after returning to office, President Trump declared a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to address, among other things, the public health crisis caused by fentanyl and illicit drugs flowing across the northern border into the United States. Canada has failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of fentanyl and other illicit drugs that has retaliated against the United States with the President's actions to address this unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States. We're calling it a threat already. In response to Canada's continued inaction and retaliation, President Trump has found it necessary to increase the tariffs on Canada from 25 to 35% to effectively address the existing emergency. It basically said the goods under the USMCA are exempt from that. It goes on, combating Canada's continued role in the opioid crisis. Given Canada's continued failure to arrest traffickers, seize illicit drugs, or coordinate with U.S. law enforcement, and Canada's retaliation against the United States for the President's actions to address the unusual and extraordinary threat to America, further presidential action is necessary and appropriate to protect American lives and the national security and foreign policy of the United States. That's the key here. They're saying that we are threatening American lives and American national security. Their justification here again is Mexican cartels are increasingly operating fentanyl and nitazenes synthesis, whatever that is, labs in Canada. A recent study highlighted Canada's heightened domestic production of fentanyl and its growing footprint within international narcotics distribution. Canada-based drug trafficking organizations maintain robust super labs, mostly in rural and dense areas in Western Canada, some of which can produce 44 to 66 pounds of fentanyl weekly. Fentanyl seizures at the northern border this fiscal year, with 2 months remaining, have surpassed total seizures of the past 3 years combined, underscoring Canada's escalating role in the crisis. That is such bunk. By the way, the reason it's so much more than in previous years, because it was zero in previous years, there was none. This whole thing is Trump making excuses to go after Canada.
Trump is already following Putin's playbook. Putin justified invading the Ukraine by claiming that it wasn't a real country, just a wayward piece of real estate that by history should be part of Russia. Well, Trump uses similar language about Canada, treating us more like America's attic than a sovereign nation. He jokes, he calls it jokes, about annexation, threatened tariffs, and has shown zero hesitation to bullying and trying to turn his MAGA followers against us.
And frankly, the way that gets solved is Canada should honestly become our 51st state. We wouldn't have a northern border problem. We wouldn't have a tariff problem. They don't have much. They spend very little, as you know, the least of almost anybody on military. But Canada would be great as our cherished 51st state. You wouldn't have to worry about borders. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And by the way, Canada is very highly taxed, and we're very low tax. We're considered a low-tax nation because of me, because I cut the taxes so low. So the people of Canada would pay much less tax. It makes a lot of sense. And by the way, when you take away that artificial line that looks like it was done with a ruler, and that's what it was. Some guy sat there years ago and they said, rah. Well, when you take away that and you look at that beautiful formation of Canada and the United States, there is no place anywhere in the world that looks like that. It's on Greenland, and then if you add Greenland, that's it. I mean, that's pretty good to look.
Putin kept claiming that he was liberating Ukrainians and freeing them from fascist rule. Well, Trump is on a crusade against progressive politics and would just love to eliminate the socialist threat on his northern border.
They don't like they didn't like the rhetoric about the 51st state. I just kind of say, well, I think in my time in Congress, that may be the first time that America has extended an offer to someone else to become part of the country. It's a sign of affection.
Is it?
Sure. You know,
we want you to become, we want you to become part of the United States.
Yeah, because what do? Trump's a deal maker. He looks at this and says, getting Canada to be a part of the United States, it's good for America, and he believes it's good, and we believe it's good for Canada. But the answer is, has been a resounding no from the Canadians. Why they're offended by such a generous offer, I'm not sure, but they are. We have to deal with it, and we will.
Putin's tanks made Ukraine vulnerable, and Trump's tariffs and border politics could well do the same to Canada. We need to defend our resources and geography. Russia targeted Ukraine's ports and energy. Trump, meanwhile, is eyeing Canada's oil, fresh water, and Arctic access.
Not only would we double the size of the country, we'd probably quadruple the oil. Also, we'd have all the timber, the fish, pretty much every real estate conglomerate, medicine, livestock. There's so many great industries we could, again, not conquer, absorb. So Canada, welcome to America, whether you like it or not.
Russia lined up troops on the border. Trump could easily line up border patrols, militarized crossings, and choke Canada's economy. Putin spread all kinds of disinformation to justify his actions, and Trump's MAGA army is already stoking separatism in Alberta and Western Canada, amplifying far-right voices. And then you have this MAGA idiot, Maine State Senator, Republican Senator Joseph E. Martin, who took the time to send an invitation to Canada's western provinces about joining the United States, inviting them to join and telling them what was expected of them. What a fucking asshole. Donald Trump is fully committed to undermining alliances. Putin framed the Ukraine as a threat because it wanted to join NATO. Well, Trump has already trashed NATO, undermined NORAD, and could very easily weaken Canada's security guarantees.
I get it. You say that Americans don't have a problem with Canadians, and we don't. But it seems like you have a problem with us. Because if I were a citizen of another country and I was a neighbor of the United States, I would consider it a privilege to be taken over by the United States of America. That's what everybody else in the world wants, American citizenship. For some reason, that's repellent to you Canadians. And I find that personally offensive, Premier. Well, that's the point, because Trump says we're paying to protect Canada a lot, but Canada's ripping America off on trade. So why don't we just redraw the map to make it fair?
Now, all of this is not just theory. Right now, as we speak, Trump is deploying 3 American warships to Venezuela. He says it's about stability and freedom. Yeah, right. History tells us it's about influence and intimidation. If Trump is willing to flex U.S. military muscle against South America, what makes us think that Canada is any different and is any safer? Military intimidation, economic blackmail, propaganda, it's all part of the same authoritarian playbook. When Vladimir Putin was threatening to march into the Ukraine, many, even most, said it just wasn't possible. He couldn't get away with that. The world would stop him. Well, he did, and no one has stopped him to date, and Trump is about to reward him by saying Russia should keep all the land that they occupied. Back in 1995, filmmaker Michael Moore made a movie, which was a satire called Canadian Bacon. And it basically talked about a U.S. president deciding to invade Canada. It was all made in fun. I'd like us to stop for a minute and review a couple of clips from that film. I'll comment on them when we're done.
For an unpopular president, it's time to give war a chance.
Dead.
What are we going to do for an enemy now?
A riot between Americans and Canadians broke out last night.
Now, with a little inspiration.
All I said was Canadian beer sucks! Give me 1 week and I'll have Americans burning maple leaves.
They'll create a cause worth fighting for.
Is Canadian Prime Minister Clark MacDonald a member of a satanic cult?
Oh, that is stunning.
Canadians are always dreaming up a lot of ways to ruin our lives. The metric system, for the love of God.
Oh, there's a time to think, there's a time to act. And this, gentlemen, There's no time to think.
Move up! Welcome to Canada.
I'm your worst nightmare.
What we have here is a brave but misguided group of Americans who've gone right into Canada and kicked some serious Canadian butt.
Oh, Americans. Welcome to Ontario. Sportsman's paradise. Isn't it, though?
John Candy.
You Canadians are so sneaky.
Alan Alda.
Surrender pronto, or we'll level Toronto.
All right, now how did you know that was a nuclear facility?
Well, they tricked us on that one. That's a hospital.
But it's a hell of a strike.
I can't kill America's neighbors.
I can.
Now, I don't find much funny about the situation that we're in with the U.S., but it amazes me the irony of just how true that film rings today. The humor, satire, and comedy of 30 years ago finds a place in our current world today. So, would Trump actually invade Canada? Absolutely. The man who praises Putin's Ukraine invasion and who's sending warships into Venezuela and who has armies marching in American cities and streets, he's already shown he's willing to break every democratic norm that exists. Sadly, in today's world, Canada isn't just America's friendly neighbor anymore. Under Trump, we've become America's next target. I want to thank you all for watching this video. And please, like the video, leave your comments, tell me what you think, and subscribe to the channel. Anything you can do is appreciated. If Donald Trump ever does invade Canada, I'll be waiting at the border and he's going to learn what fighting for freedom is truly about. Thank you very much for watching, and you have yourself a great week. And remember, all is not lost. We will not let that guy, we cannot let that bastard get away with it. Thanks a lot again, and we'll talk to you soon.